December 1915, Eastern Front. More than a year has passed since the start of the First World War. During this time, Russia had suffered several setbacks and lost part of its territories to the Central Powers of Austria-Hungary and Germany. These defeats have greatly increased the war exhaustion in Russia. It might not be able to bear the burden of the war for long. Russia decided to mobilize all its available resources to go on the offensive and attempt to put an end to the war in 1916, before its war exhaustion reached critical levels. But going on the offensive was not easy. The Central Powers did have less troops on the Eastern Front, but they had built a strong line of fortifications to defend against Russian attacks. The main difficulty for the Russian offensive was to break through these defenses. As time passed, the Russian forces gained strength and would mount increasingly larger attacks during 1916. The first attack was launched south of the Pripyat marshes. Here the Russian forces were faced by Austria-Hungary. The Austro-Hungarian army was somewhat inferior to the Russian, and Russia hoped to break through the Austro-Hungarian positions without having a strong numerical advantage. It attacked on the southern sector of the front at the end of 1915. However, the offensive failed and Russia was unable to make any lasting gains into Austro-Hungarian defenses. With this approach not working out, Russia decided to rely more on its numerical advantage to break the Central Powers' lines. The next offensive would be launched on the northern part of the front, where Russia had an overall numerical advantage of 2-1 in its favor against the German forces. This allowed Russia to gather a strong numerical superiority of 4-1 on the point of the main attack. Russia launched the offensive in March of 1916. However, the organization of the defending German army proved to be much superior to the Russian forces. The German forces repelled most of the Russian attacks and retook all lost positions with a counterattack. Russia made no progress, and this offensive too had failed. The Russian offensives had not shown much promise in defeating the Central Powers by the summer of 1916. With the time running low, Russia decided to launch a major offensive along the whole front. It would be split into separate offensives, one in the northern and the other on the southern part of the front. The southern offensive was the first one to be launched, and it would be known as the Brusilov offensive. Russia had only a small numerical superiority over the Austro-Hungarian forces. But Russia had learned better tactics from the earlier offensives, and this greatly improved the performance of the Russian army. The attacks were launched in early June of 1916. In the north, the Russian forces broke through the Austro-Hungarian defenses. In the south too, the Austro-Hungarian defenses were breached. The third attack was able to make some inroads into the Austro-Hungarian lines, and the fourth attack failed to make any gains. Russia had broken through the Austro-Hungarian fortifications. The Russian forces attempted to continue the offensive, but they lacked the numerical advantage to do that. In the north, Russia made some progress, but soon its advance was stopped by the arrival of the German reinforcements. In the south, the Austro-Hungarians retreated into the Carpathian Mountains, where they established new defensive positions. On these, they were able to halt the Russian advance. By that time, Russia had lost 500,000 men as dead, missing and wounded. However, it could make 2 breaches into the Central Powers' defensive positions. Russia decided to abandon the offensive in the northern part of the front and deploy all available forces to continue the offensive in the south. By the end of June, Russia had a numerical advantage of 2-1 in this area. But at the same time, the Central Powers received reinforcements and rebuilt their fortifications. Russia proceeded with the offensive in 3 directions. In the north, Russia attacked an undamaged section of the Central Powers' defenses held by Austro-Hungarian and German forces. The offensive made only very marginal gains and had to be called off. Further south, Russia did only little better. The main location of the breakthrough was now blocked off by strong German forces. Russia was only able to advance against weaker Austro-Hungarian forces on the flanks and could not make large progress. In the south, the Austro-Hungarian forces had to give up some ground, but they were able to mostly hold the Russian army back. The offensive could not gain much territory and cost Russia another 400,000 soldiers, but it also weakened the defending forces. In August, the last group of Free Russian forces were deployed to the southern front for the final offensive. This time the attacks would be limited only by two areas. In the north against the German forces and in the south against Austria-Hungary. In the north, Russia was only able to make very small territorial gains against the German forces, and the offensive here failed. In the south, Russia had much greater success. The Austro-Hungarian forces had been weakened by previous offensives, and under new Russian attacks, their front line collapsed. They had to retreat and abandoned a large part of their fortified positions. Russia had broken through the Central Powers' defenses, but it had lost the manpower to continue the attacks. Another 540,000 would become casualties during this offensive. With the Austro-Hungarian positions broken, just one more attack might be sufficient to inflict a major defeat on the Central Powers. Russia convinced Romania to join its side in order to provide these forces. The Romanian army had 660,000 men, which could be enough to launch another offensive against Austro-Hungary. This might lead to the Austro-Hungarian forces becoming overextended and collapsing. In late August, Romania invaded Austro-Hungarian territory. The Central Powers lacked forces and could counter this by deploying less than half the number of soldiers than Romania had. However, the Central Powers forces had been greatly improved from the experience of the First World War. Romania had been at peace and its army lacked these innovations. This made the Central Powers forces much stronger despite their numerical inferiority to the Romanian forces. The Central Powers overran parts of the Romanian army in the south of the Danube. In the north, they pushed the Romanian forces back into the Carpathian Mountains. Romania had the good natural defensive positions of the Danube River and the Carpathian Mountains, but these were not enough to withstand the advantage the Central Powers had over the Romanian forces. Soon, the Central Powers had crossed the Carpathians and the Danube and entered the Romanian heartland. The Romanian army began to fall back. Russia had to go on the defensive and redeploy its forces to defend the Romanian front. Between the Carpathians and the Danube, it was able to create another defensive line and stop any further advance by the Central Powers. This was the last major operation on the Eastern Front during 1916. Both sides dug in for the winter. The winter brought an internal crisis to Russia. Russia had failed to defeat the Central Powers, and now the war exhaustion had reached critical levels. This resulted in political turmoil, which we will not go into in this video, but the main trend was that as the time passed, the war exhaustion grew and decreased Russia's ability to resist the Central Powers. By the summer of 1917, this had led to a large-scale weakening of the discipline in the Russian army. But Russia still had a large advantage over the Central Powers in numbers, and it decided to go on the offensive in July of 1917 on the southern front. Here, Russia had a numerical superiority of 3-1. Russia was to attack in one area. However, by that time, the process of disintegration had already gone too far. The discipline of the Russian forces was so poor that a large part of the soldiers began refusing to go on the attack. The northern attack against the German forces made only very small territorial gains. The southern attack against Austria-Hungary made more gains, but was eventually stopped. Then the Central Powers launched a counterattack. It caused the discipline in the Russian army to completely collapse. Russian forces retreated with minimal resistance, and almost all the land taken from Austria-Hungary was lost to the Central Powers. Eventually, Russia was able to regroup its forces and stop the Central Powers. But the overall situation continued to deteriorate. During the following months, the war exhaustion caused the government to begin to completely lose control over the country, and Russia moved further toward collapse. Germany began a series of offensives targeting the Russian capital of Petrograd. In September, Germany captured the city of Riga and breached the Russian defensive line. In October, it launched an amphibious attack and occupied the Estonian islands. With the Russian state being near collapse and its army disintegrating, Russia could not offer effective resistance to the Central Powers. In November of 1917, a truce was signed between Russia and the Central Powers, and this put an end to the participation of Russia in the war. Russia failed to defeat the Central Powers in time and put an end to the conflict. As a result, it suffered a defeat from the Central Powers. But this was not the worst thing about the situation for Russia. The collapse of the Russian state allowed the Bolsheviks, a radical left-wing faction, to seize power in Petrograd and declare themselves the government. As different factions began fighting for power, the future of Russia would be decided in a new war, the Russian Civil War. We will cover it in the next video. With this third video, we have finished covering most of the Eastern Front in World War I, and it has been a long journey. I would like to thank my patrons for supporting me during this time, especially Nasim Hanna, Strontiasberg and Omega 21.